Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take complex source material, filter out the noise, and extract the essential wisdom just for you. Today, we're immersing ourselves in a really celebrated chapter of classical Indian thought. It's chapter 9 of the Bhagavad Gita, and it has this beautiful title, The King of Science, the King of Secrets.
Or Rajavijarajaguya Yoga.
Exactly. And our mission today is to unpack the central promise here. Right at the start, Lord Krishna says that knowing the secret wisdom will free you from the inauspicious, from the Ashubha. But what is that really? Is it just bad luck or something, much deeper that keeps us stuck?
Well, the knowledge is introduced with the highest possible stakes. I mean, Krishna doesn't mince words in verse 2. He says it is the king of all sciences, the king of all secrets. It's most sacred, it's excellent. It's really set apart from every other kind of knowledge in the text.
Okay, but if it's the king of secrets, I'm expecting it to be incredibly difficult to get a handle on. And yet the text makes some pretty amazing claims about how accessible it is.
It really does. It lists three characteristics that make it so powerful. First, it's directly fruitful. You don't have to wait for lifetimes to see the results. Second, it's imperishable. Once you have that wisdom, it endures. And third, and this is maybe the most surprising part, it is easy to practice.
Easy.
Faith alone is enough.
So if it's that easy, why doesn't everyone just, achieve it? What's the barrier? What's the prerequisite that Krishna insists on?
The prerequisite is profoundly simple, but it's often the hardest thing for us to manage. It's freedom from the fault of malice or doubt. You have to be receptive. Krishna basically tells Arjuna, because you don't have this defect, because you're trusting, I'm going to share this with you.
So if you approach it with cynicism, the door is just closed.
The knowledge just can't land. It's like trying to receive a radio signal with the radio turned off.
Right. Doubt is the filter that blocks the signal.
Okay.
Let's get into that key term we mentioned, Ashubha. When you translate it as inauspicious, it sounds a bit vague, but the philosophical tension around this word is really important, isn't it?
It's crucial, because where you locate the problem dictates the solution you're going to choose. If you look at the great commentators, you see this key distinction. One school of thought, thinkers like Sukaracharya, they argue Ashubha is bondage to the world.
Ah, so the world itself isn't the problem, but our attachment to it is.
Exactly. But then you have a slightly different view where some argue the world itself is called inauspicious because, it inherently brings pain, it ends in decay. And then there's a third view that says Ashubha refers to all the paths and rituals that turn you away from the divine.
So is the problem out there or in here? Is the world rotten or is the way we're looking at it flawed?
The synthesis really suggests the latter. And that's why Swami Chinmayananda's take is so helpful here. He says Ashubha is simply the wrong valuation of things.
Wrong valuation.
Yeah, overvaluing the fleeting, the trivial like chasing fame or pleasure, and undervaluing what's permanent, the divine reality.
That really brings it home for you, the listener. If you're struggling, the solution isn't to just quit your job and run off to the mountains. The solution is to adjust your internal GPS. Running away isn't wisdom. The thing that's truly binding you, the inauspicious element, is the attachment.
Precisely. And that brings us right back to faith, to Dharma. Verse 3 gives this warning that a person without faith in this doctrine, this understanding, they just don't attain the goal. They get stuck wandering in the cycle of birth and death because they've completely failed to see what reality actually is.
Okay, this idea of freeing ourselves from internal attachment is huge, but how does that work in the actual structure of existence? And this gets us to a really deep philosophical paradox in verses 4 and 5. The entire world is pervaded by this unmanifest supreme. All beings exist because of God's will, but, and here's the twist, God is not actually in them. How can reality be everywhere, but also confined by nothing?
It's a concept that is deliberately designed to strain our normal way of thinking. The Lord is called unmanifest because he is subtle, he's beyond our senses, omnipresent, like the space that holds everything.
Okay, that part makes sense. But why the immediate counterstatement, I am not in them? That sounds like it's denying omnipresence. It feels like a contradiction.
It's a denial of limitation or confinement. We have to shift from thinking about physical presence to a kind of subtle support. Think of the classic analogy, the soul and the body.
Right.
Our consciousness, our soul, is present everywhere in the body. It enlivens every single cell. But the soul isn't trapped or contained by any one cell or any organ. It remains transcendent.
So God sustains all beings, but remains unbound by their flaws, their limits.
Exactly. He's unbound. And that detachment is what allows for his complete impartiality.
That distinction, sustaining without being confined, is the whole key. It's a relationship of, well, radical dependency on our side without any kind of mutual imprisonment on God's part.
Yes, and we see this reinforced with that amazing cosmological analogy in verse 6. Krishna uses the example of space and air. Just as the great air, born from space, always abides in space.
All created beings, born from God's will, dwell in him.
And that leads to three immediate corollaries, three implications for us.
And what are they?
First, we're finite. God is infinite. Second, because of that, God isn't subject to our limitations or our faults. And third, he stays uniformly unchanged by our actions, our mistakes, our progress. His nature is just pristine, even while sustaining all the chaos of the world.
So now that we have that detached, sustaining relationship, let's look at the machinery of existence itself, the cycles of creation and dissolution.
The great wheel of time. The text describes these vast cosmic time cycles, sometimes called a kalpa. We're talking billions of years. At the end of a kalpa, all beings return and merge into God's nature, into this primordial state.
And then at the next creation,
God fashions them all over again. The universe sort of breathes in and out.
but when God creates this community of beings, verse 8 says they're enslaved to their own nature. So they're not just formed randomly, are they?
No, absolutely not. Their form, their nature, it's all determined by their past actions.
Mhm.
This is the law of karma. So at a new creation, God fashions beings according to their previous karmic baggage, basically.
But wait, if God is directly responsible for that, for assigning them these new forms, why isn't he bound by those actions? Verse 9 says his action is non-binding.
And we loop right back to detachment. He does all this without any attachment. He's impartial. He's just acting according to universal law. There's no personal stake for him in the outcome, so nothing binds him.
The ultimate manager. He orchestrates everything but keeps zero personal or emotional debt, and nature is just the instrument here.
Precisely. Verse 10 says that nature, the principle that makes everything, it only acts under God's consciousness. Inert matter generates living beings because of this divine animating power.
And this is where we see a huge contrast emerge in the text. Between two types of people, really. Those who fail to see this divine truth and what are called the great souls.
Yes, and those who fail are called fools in verses 11 and 12. Their mistake is not seeing God's lordship in all of creation. And even when God incarnates, they just treat him like a regular human dependent on a body.
And what's the consequence of that kind of lack of reverence?
They fall into cruel, demonic natures. Their knowledge, their actions, their hopes, they're all called vain or worthless because they're just chasing impermanent worldly things. They trade supreme happiness for fleeting pleasure.
So now let's pivot to the great souls in verses 13 and 14. What makes their path successful?
They are attached to the godly nature. They know God is the eternal cause. And they worship him with a single-minded, undivided heart, constantly singing his glories, always striving.
What's really striking here is how broad the definition of worship is. Verse 15 talks about different, equally valid ways to realize God.
It does. It validates so many different spiritual paths as long as the goal is solely God. You have bhakti, the path of loving devotion, worshiping through names and attributes. Then you have jnana, the path of knowledge, realizing the formless through this feeling of unity.
And then there's karma yoga, which I think feels the most practical for a lot of people today.
Exactly. Karma means action. This path is about serving the world as if it were the face of God. So, serving soup in a shelter, teaching a child, even just doing your daily work with focused, selfless intent.
All acts of worship.
All of them become unified when the aim is divine. And the reason they all converge is laid out in this absolute declaration in verses 16 and 17.
The ultimate oneness.
This is the secret, encapsulated. Krishna says, I am the doer. I am the sacrifice, the oblation, the mantra, the fire, the ghee. I am the creator, sustainer, parent. The sacred syllable Om, the Vedas.
Everything, the entire ritual, every element of creation, it's all God's own play.
And if we compare the results of these paths, the difference is just so stark. Those who perform rituals with desire, seeking heaven, they get it. They attain celestial pleasure. But when their good merits run out, they're thrown right back into the mortal world. It's a constant cycle.
But the promise to the exclusive devotee, the one who has that real faith we talked about at the start, that promise is absolute protection.
It's a radical promise. For those who worship God alone, without desire, constantly remembering him, God himself guarantees their protection and attainment. He makes sure they keep what they've gained and provides what they lack. The outcome isn't left to chance.
And the simplicity of this path is just so beautiful. It's captured in that famous verse 26, which is really the essence of its accessibility.
All the formality just falls away.
Yeah.
God says that if a devotee offers something simple, a leaf, a flower, a fruit, even just water with love, with a pure, desireless mind, that simple offering is graciously accepted.
So the value isn't in the object.
No, it's zeroed out of the object and placed entirely on the heartfelt intention behind it.
And this is open to everyone because God is, as verse 29 confirms, utterly impartial.
He pervades all impartially. No one is inherently dear or hateful. If some people seem to manifest more divine qualities, it's because of their own purity. The analogy is like pots of water reflecting the sun.
Right.
The sun shines on all of them equally, but only the pure, still water reflects the sun clearly. So the grace you experience depends on the purity of your own mind.
And that brings us to maybe the most powerful, most revolutionary statement in the whole Gita, the acceptance of the great sinner in verse 30.
This is so hopeful. It promises that even a great sinner, if they turn to God with exclusive devotion, they have to be regarded as saintly. Because if they have sincerely resolved to change, they quickly become virtuous, they attain peace. And then the text adds the ultimate promise. God's devotee is never lost. Your past literally does not matter if your sincerity in this moment is absolute.
And its inclusivity gets even more radical in verse 32, which just smashes historical social barriers.
Yes, it explicitly states that women, Vaishyas, Shudras, and those traditionally of sinful birth groups that were historically restricted from certain rites, they all attain the supreme goal by taking refuge in God. The path taught here is universal. It opens the ultimate refuge to all humanity, no exceptions.
So in the end, the whole chapter really boils down to a four-part path of dedication, doesn't it? Laid out in verse 34.
It does. Fix your mind in me. Be my devotee. Offer me worship and prostrate to me. By dedicating your thoughts, intentions, actions, and reverence wholly to the divine, you inevitably attain God.
So this ninth chapter really is the pivot point of the whole text.
It's the critical pivot. It moves from knowledge, jnana, through action, karma, and establishes pure, steadfast devotion bhakti as the most direct, accessible, and guaranteed path to liberation.
Yeah.
For everyone.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? Well, the immediate mandate is right there in verse 27. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, offer, or practice, dedicate it all to God. This simple, conscious act of surrendering purifies your action, removes the error, and it frees you from the binding force of karma. That is the ultimate freedom from the Ashubha. So here's a thought to take with you. If God accepts even the great sinner who sincerely resolves, guaranteeing they're never lost, and if the only real requirement for this ultimate attainment is simple, heartfelt intention, what small, seemingly insignificant daily action, whether it's answering an email, drinking a glass of water, or just stopping to breathe, can you begin to consciously surrender, knowing that intention is the only requirement for accessing the King of Secrets? Something powerful to ponder as you move through your day.